Dad, don't come to my wedding. You'll embarrass me. I stood motionless in the middle of the summit, the scent of fresh cedar seeping into my old flannel shirt. Sunlight slid across the timber beams I had set with my own two hands. The violins were still tuning, ribbons on the veranda fluttered softly, and the smell of rosemary and melted butter hung in the air. Spencer glanced at his Rolex while Mrs. Harrington adjusted a champagne flute like she was positioning a soldier. As for me, my pocket held a red wax-sealed envelope labeled Safety Observation, a sponsorship contract folded at Article 7B, and a carpenter's pencil resting against an old callus. Jess had already prepped a live microphone for the special speaker, timed for exactly 5 minutes. The exit sign down the hall flickered once, then held steady. Tonight, I wasn't here to argue. I was waiting for the right moment, the right signature, the right click. And you won't believe what happened right after the words, "Ladies and gentlemen, may I have 3 minutes of your time?" Before we continue, subscribe to the channel and let me know where you're listening from in the comments. The late summer Oregon sun poured through the massive glass windows of the summit at Eagle's Crest Lodge, a light so clear and honey gold it highlighted every grain in the enormous Douglas fir beams spanning the ceiling. This was my creation. Every inch of soil, every plank, every single screw bore the mark of Callahan Construction and Sons. The smell of cedar and new paint still lingered in the air, the scent of accomplishment. But right now, all I could taste was a bitter tang at the back of my throat. "Mr. Callahan, you're a lifesaver." The voice of Jess Ramirez, the energetic young wedding coordinator, pulled me from my thoughts. Her father, Miguel, had been my foreman for over 20 years. I'd known Jess since she was a little kid running around my construction sites. Now she was struggling with an antique oak table, the one the Harringtons insisted on using to display their 7-tiered wedding cake. 2 young waiters were giving it their all, but the lead-heavy table wouldn't budge. I didn't think twice. It was instinct. I gave Jess a nod, rolled up the sleeves of my familiar flannel shirt, and walked over. "Let me get that, boys," I said to the 2 young men. I bent down, found the right leverage point, and lifted with my legs, not my back, a lesson my own father had taught me when I was 15. The ponderous table lifted slowly off the floor to the audible sighs of relief from the waiters. I set it down gently in the exact spot Mrs. Harrington had designated, precise to the centimeter. Jess was beaming. But as I turned, I caught the eyes of the Harringtons. They said nothing, just exchanged a brief glance, a silent language of the upper crust I could never comprehend. Then Mrs. Harrington, Spencer's mother, spoke, her voice soft but sharp as a shard of broken glass. "It's so useful having someone accustomed to manual labor." The air in the room thickened. Spencer, my future son-in-law, suddenly became intensely focused on his phone, as if he'd just received news of a stock market crash. And Kelly, my daughter, my own flesh and blood, her face flushed crimson. Not with anger, but with shame. I'd seen that look too many times before. Right after the meeting, as I was heading out to my pickup, Kelly intercepted me in the slate-tiled hallway. She pulled me into a dim corner where the sunlight didn't reach. "Dad?" she began, her voice trembling, refusing to meet my eyes. "Spencer and I were talking, and we think it would be better if you didn't attend the main ceremony." The words hung in the cold air of the corridor. For a second, I thought I'd misheard. "What's that, honey?" "Spencer's guests just wouldn't understand," she whispered, twisting the hem of her expensive silk dress. "Your style, it just doesn't fit. I don't want you to be uncomfortable, and I don't want them to be either." "My style?" I repeated, a chill running down my spine. "The style of a construction worker who raised you?" "That's not it, Dad," Kelly said, waving her hands dismissively, but the panic in her eyes betrayed her. "It's just, you've already used the company's influence to get us this venue as a gift. I think that's more than enough." My heart seized. This was her second wedding. Her first marriage, to a bohemian musician she'd fallen for in college, had ended in ruins. I had watched my daughter fall apart, shattered, her faith in everything broken. I had used these hands to pick up the pieces of her life, to help her stand again. When Spencer came along, with his stability and his family's pedigree, I had breathed a sigh of relief. I promised myself this wedding would be perfect, flawless. I wanted to make up for all the pain she'd been through. I wanted to build her a happiness as solid as the foundation of the summit, and for that, to me, nothing was more than enough. More than enough. The words echoed in my head. More than enough. Just like how me arranging for Spencer to go salmon fishing with a retired timber baron, a meeting that landed him his first major West Coast contract, was more than enough. Just like how I'd spent 6 straight weekends personally supervising my best crew to remodel their entire kitchen and build a cedar deck on their new house, saving them at least $50,000, was more than enough. Everything I did, every sacrifice, every drop of sweat, was all being tallied up like a completed transaction. I looked deep into my daughter's eyes. I expected to see malice, selfishness, maybe a hint of cruelty. But there was none. What I saw was far worse. It was insecurity. It was the profound fear of someone trying to cling to a world she didn't belong to, willing to cut away anything or anyone that might drag her back down to earth. And in that instant, something strange happened. The sharp pain in my chest didn't vanish, but it settled. Like a nuclear reactor, the molten rage began to be contained, transforming into a different kind of energy, cold, focused, and terrifyingly powerful. A deadly calm washed over me. I reached out and gently brushed a stray lock of hair from Kelly's tear-streaked face. I smiled, a smile I was certain she would never understand. "All right, Kelly," I said, my voice unnervingly steady. "If that's what will make you happy." She let out a breath of relief, as if I had just granted her a pardon. "I knew you'd understand," she said, giving me a hurried, perfunctory hug. It felt hollow, empty. "Oh, I understand," I whispered into her hair. "I understand better than you could possibly imagine." As I walked out to the parking lot, I passed Spencer's gleaming silver Tesla Model S. He was sitting inside, sunglasses on, pretending to be busy with his phone. He didn't even bother to look up. I walked over to my Ford F-250, the truck that had been with me through countless job sites, hauled countless tons of materials, and witnessed me coming home exhausted but happy countless times. Its blue paint had a few scratches. The truck bed still held a light dusting of cement. It was the embodiment of everything my daughter and her new family were ashamed of. I got into the cab, the familiar smell of old leather and faint coffee welcoming me like an old friend. I didn't start the engine right away. I just sat there, looking at the summit, my greatest architectural achievement, a monument of wood and stone to everything I had worked my entire life to build. And a bitter truth dawned on me. I had built my daughter a castle, but I had forgotten to teach her the value of the foundation stones. All right. Class was about to be in session, and believe me, this was one lesson she would never forget. I drove out of the summit's parking lot, the sound of tires crunching on freshly laid gravel. I didn't go far, just to a bend in the mountain road where I could pull my F-250 onto the shoulder, kill the engine, and look down at my creation, glowing in the fading light. More than enough. The words cut into my mind like a dull saw blade. I had provided them with more than enough. What a joke! Because just 6 months ago, Spencer, my darling son-in-law, was struggling like a salmon trying to swim upstream. He was an East Coast kid with his designer suits and an Ivy League degree, trying to break into a world where deals were still sealed with a firm handshake and trust was built over decades, not trading algorithms. My world. He needed a big client, a whale, to prove his mettle on the West Coast. And he had his sights set on one of the biggest, Old Man Abernathy, the retired timber baron, a living Oregon legend. Getting a meeting with Abernathy was like finding a surviving 1,000-year-old cedar. He didn't answer emails, didn't take calls from strangers, and certainly wasn't interested in the complex investment strategies of some young buck from Boston. But he owed me a favor. A long time ago, when his company was on the ropes, Callahan Construction built him a new mill and didn't take a dime until he was back in the black. I never called it in. Until now. I didn't call Abernathy. I knew his way. I drove out to his ranch with 2 high-end fly rods and a thermos of hot coffee. I found him mending a fence. We didn't talk business. We talked about the weather, the price of lumber, and how the steelhead salmon seemed to be running early this year. Finally, I said, "Jim, I've got a future son-in-law. He's young, a little arrogant, but he's smart. He'd kill for a chance to talk to you." He looked at me, his eyes as clear blue as a winter sky. "If he's family to you, Doug, he's family to me." So the meeting was set. Not in a stuffy boardroom, but on my fishing boat, in the middle of the majestic Deschutes River. I set everything up, the lures, the lunch, even a bottle of 18-year-old single malt scotch that I knew Abernathy loved. Spencer showed up looking ridiculous in brand-new, still-creased Orvis fishing gear. I had to show him how to rig his line and cast. And then, between reeling in fish, Spencer got his talk. He got his contract, a contract that laid the foundation for his entire career in Oregon. He called me that night. "Thanks, Doug." That was a lucky connection. Lucky. As if luck had personally arranged a meeting with a reclusive billionaire, prepped the boat, and poured the scotch. He didn't see the cost, a favor I had held on to for 20 years. To him, I was just a stepping stone. And then there was the house. They bought a gorgeous modern craftsman in the Northwest Crossing neighborhood. Perfect location, great design. But Kelly, her head full of ideas gleaned from design magazines and Pinterest boards, wanted to change everything. She wanted a chef's grade kitchen and a deck for entertaining. Phrases she'd learned from her new world. They got quotes from a few city contractors. The numbers made Spencer's face go pale. That's when I stepped in. "Let me handle it," I'd said, and I did. For 6 weekends in a row, every Saturday morning while Spencer and Kelly were sleeping in or out at brunch, I was at their house with my best crew. Miguel, Jess's father, a master craftsman with wood, personally built every single hickory cabinet. Hickory is tough, a real pain to work with, but when it's done, it lasts forever. Like me, I designed and built the red cedar deck myself. I remember the feel of the raw planks under my hands, the sharp, clean scent of the wood in the sun, and the satisfaction of seeing everything fit together perfectly. I didn't charge them a cent for labor. I just gave them the materials invoice at my contractor's discount. I saved them at least $50,000, probably more. I'll never forget the look on Kelly's face when she saw the finished kitchen for the first time. Her eyes lit up. She ran over and threw her arms around me, a real, warm hug. "I love you, Daddy," she'd said. "It's more beautiful than I ever dreamed." That moment, for me, was worth more than all the money in the world. But then, a week later, I stopped by to check on a few small details. I overheard Kelly on the phone with some friend back in Boston, her voice dripping with pride. "Oh, the kitchen? We just found a contractor who gave us a great deal. You know, everything's just cheaper out here in Oregon. A contractor who gave us a great deal, not, my dad built it for us, not, it was a gift of love, but a contractor who gave us a great deal. The love, the labor, my exhausted weekends, all of it had been discounted into a business transaction, a bargain. I sat in my truck, staring at the summit. More than enough. Kelly's words now had a whole new meaning. I had given them more than enough of things they didn't value. I had given them gifts they saw as completed transactions. The plan in my mind began to sharpen. This was no longer an impulsive act of hurt. This was a calculation, a lesson in economics. I was going to teach them the true cost of things. I was going to show them what the final invoice looks like when you take the great deal contractor out of the equation. I drove my Ford F-250 down the winding mountain road, leaving the summit glittering in my rearview mirror. The Oregon sky was beginning to bleed into orange and purple, a heart-stoppingly beautiful sunset, but I was in no mood to appreciate it. Inside the cab, there was only the steady hum of the engine and the crunch of tires on gravel. The silence was a necessary vacuum, a space for my plan to take root and grow. For the next few days, I disappeared. Completely. I didn't call Kelly. I didn't respond to her perfunctory texts asking about florists or the band. I let her perfect world run on without my coarse presence. I could imagine the relief she and the Harringtons felt. They must have thought the old construction worker had learned his lesson, accepted his place on the fringes of the glorious picture they were painting. Let them enjoy their false peace. The biggest storms always follow the calmest days. Work became my sanctuary. I buried myself in blueprints, progress reports, and site visits. The smell of fresh concrete and cut pine was my therapy. Here, among men with calloused hands and dust-streaked faces, I was respected. Here, a handshake was still worth more than a 100-page contract. Here, I was Doug Callahan, builder of enduring structures, not an embarrassment to be hidden away. On a Wednesday evening, about a week after the talk with Kelly, I drove to the Steel Kettle, a roadside diner my crew frequented after a long day. There were no linen tablecloths or crystal goblets here, just worn formica tables, cracked vinyl booths, and the thick smell of strong coffee and bacon. Jess Ramirez was already waiting in a corner booth, nursing a soda. She stood up when she saw me. "Mr. Doug," she greeted me, her voice full of respect. "Thanks for coming, Jess," I said, sliding into the seat across from her. An older waitress who'd known me for 20 years brought me a black coffee without asking. We didn't beat around the bush. I trusted this girl like I trusted her father, Miguel. "You saw what happened at the summit the other day," I began. Jess nodded, her eyes flashing with understanding. "I saw, sir." "I'm sorry." "Don't be sorry," I cut in. "I don't need pity. I need your help. I need you to make sure that on the wedding day there is a live microphone on that stage, and when I take it, no one, not security, not anyone, is to cut me off until I'm finished speaking. Can you do that?" Jess looked me straight in the eye. She didn't hesitate. She'd grown up in a world where Doug Callahan's word was law. "I understand, Mr. Doug. I'll take care of it. No one will bother you." "Good," I said. "And Jess, this stays between us." "Of course," she replied, her tone firm. That was it. The meeting lasted 5 minutes, but the foundation for the final act was now laid. On the way home, I pulled over and made my second call. On the other end of the line was Alistair Finch, the owner of the summit, who was currently in London. "Doug! You calling me at this hour must mean something's important," he boomed, his voice hearty despite being halfway across the world. "Alistair," I said, "just wanted to confirm a few things on our event sponsorship contract. It states that Callahan Construction and Sons is the primary sponsor, and we've signed a financial guarantee for the full event cost, correct?" "That's right. $120,000 worth. A very generous wedding gift, Doug. And as the project's general contractor, all final operating permits and safety sign-offs require my signature to be legally valid, do they not?" There was a short pause on the line. Alistair was a shrewd businessman. He could sense something was in motion. "They do, Doug. Until you sign off on that final inspection report, the place is technically still your site. You have full access and authority to conduct any necessary safety checks at any time. Is there a problem?" "No problem at all, Alistair," I said, my voice even. "Just making sure all my ducks are in a row. I may need to conduct an unscheduled safety observation on the day of the wedding, just to be sure everything is perfect." A low chuckle came from London. "Doug, I don't know what you're planning, but I owe you for finishing that project 3 months ahead of schedule and under budget. The lodge is yours until you say it isn't. Do what you need to do." "Thanks, Alistair. I won't forget it." I hung up. All the pieces were in place. I was no longer a wounded father. I was a contractor, preparing for my most important job yet. I was going to build a lesson in foundations, a lesson in respect, and I was going to make sure it was built to last. Kelly's wedding day arrived with a kind of cruel perfection. The Oregon sky was a flawless, cloudless blue. The mountain air was crisp and cool, carrying the scent of ponderosa pines and the damp earth from an overnight rain. Every white chair was perfectly aligned, every silk ribbon fluttered in the breeze, every champagne flute was filled to the precise level. It was picture perfect, just as I had promised I would build it for her. A meticulously staged perfection, as beautiful and as fragile as a thin sheet of ice. I arrived early, but not through the main entrance. I took my F-250 up the familiar gravel service road I had driven countless times during construction. I parked in a hidden corner behind the kitchens, a place frequented only by laborers and catering staff. Miguel, Jess's father, was there waiting for me. He didn't ask any questions. He just gave my shoulder a firm squeeze, a working man's grip, strong and full of trust. "Everything is ready, boss," he said, and in his eyes I saw an understanding that needed no words. I wasn't wearing a suit. I was wearing my cleanest work clothes. A fresh pair of Carhartt work jeans, my worn Red Wing boots polished to a dull shine, and a blue chambray shirt with Callahan Construction and Sons neatly embroidered on the pocket. This wasn't an outfit. It was my armor. I wasn't here to cause a scene. I was here to do a job, one final job for this project. Through a kitchen window, where the aroma of sautéed garlic and herbs wafted out, I could see it all unfolding. A string quartet was playing something by Vivaldi, the cheerful notes dancing on the air in stark contrast to the weight in my chest. Guests in silk dresses and tailored suits mingled, sipping champagne and making small talk. They looked like actors in a movie I didn't belong in, enjoying a set whose construction they knew nothing about. And then I saw her. Kelly. She was stunning in an ivory white wedding gown, her hair swept up in an elegant chignon. For a fleeting moment, her image superimposed over that of a 5-year-old Kelly with pigtails, proudly showing me a lopsided birdhouse she'd built from scrap wood. Her eyes had sparkled then, just as they did now, but her current smile, though radiant, held a tension that only I, her father who had seen that smile 1,000 times, could recognize. She was playing her part, the happy bride entering a prestigious family. Spencer stood beside her, looking dapper but slightly impatient, repeatedly glancing at his Rolex. And the Harringtons? They moved through the crowd like a king and queen in their court, smug and proud. It was time. When Jess Ramirez gave the signal, a discreet nod only I could see, I took a deep breath, filled my lungs with the cool air, and stepped out from the shadows of the service area, walking directly onto the terrace. My appearance was like a stone tossed into a still pond. Conversations sputtered and died. Champagne glasses paused halfway to lips. Hundreds of pairs of eyes swiveled toward me, a mixture of curiosity, disdain, and confusion. What was a workman doing here? Was there a problem with the plumbing? I saw the color drain from Kelly's face. Her smile froze, then shattered like glass. Her eyes grew wide with panic and disbelief. Spencer looked like he'd just swallowed a fly. And Mr. Harrington, his brow furrowed, his face flushing with anger. He started toward me, his stride full of authority, clearly intending to intercept me and handle this inconvenience quickly. But Jess was quicker. She stepped up to the ceremonial dais, where the microphone was waiting, and her voice rang out, clear and professional, cutting through the tense silence. "Ladies and gentlemen, your attention, please. Before the ceremony begins, we have a special word from a very important person who made this day possible. Please welcome the primary sponsor of this event and the contractor who built this beautiful lodge, Mr. Douglas Callahan." All eyes snapped back to me, but this time with a different kind of shock. Primary sponsor? Contractor? The words didn't match the man in work clothes standing before them. Mr. Harrington stopped in his tracks, his face a mask of bewildered doubt. I walked up to the dais, feeling the solid flagstone beneath my feet. The flagstone I myself had laid. I looked at the crowd, then I looked at Kelly. She looked like she was about to faint, one hand gripping Spencer's arm. "Good afternoon," I began, my voice steady. "Welcome to the summit. I know I don't look like a guest. That's because I'm the man who built this place from the very foundation you're standing on." I held up my hands, the calluses a road map of my life's work, proof of 1,000 hours spent in the sun and rain. I'm proud of these hands. They raised a beautiful, intelligent daughter. They gave her an education I never had, and they built this castle for her special day. I paused, looking directly into Kelly's eyes, trying to find a flicker of the little girl I once knew. And it is because of these hands, because of these clothes, because I am a construction worker, that my own daughter asked me not to be at her wedding today. She said I would embarrass her. A shocked murmur rippled through the crowd like a sudden wind. I could see Mrs. Harrington's mouth agape, her bright red lipstick looking garish. I turned my gaze to Spencer and Kelly. "But shame is a funny thing," I continued, my voice hardening now, devoid of sentiment. "I used connections I spent a lifetime building to help you land your first big contract here, Spencer. I used these hands and my best men to build you a dream kitchen and deck, Kelly. And then I signed a financial guarantee for $120,000 to give you this party, all of this luxury." Each revelation was like a punch to the gut of the audience. The number, $120,000, hung in the air, stunning everyone into silence. I saw Mr. Harrington go pale, the angry flush on his face replaced by the white pallor of fear. "All of that," I said, my voice dropping, carrying the weight of my accumulated pain, "is called a father's love. But when that love is answered with shame, it becomes a lesson." This was the moment, the pivot. As of right now, I am officially rescinding the financial guarantee from Callahan Construction and Sons. The bill for today's event will be sent directly to the Harrington family. If there was silence before, now there was electric shock. I heard a glass shatter on the flagstone, Mr. Harrington looked like he was about to have a stroke, staggering and grabbing a chair for support. But I wasn't finished. I bent down and picked up a leather portfolio I had placed at the foot of the dais. I opened it slowly. And as the general contractor, who is ultimately responsible for the safety of this structure until I sign the final inspection report, I pulled out a document with a red border, the bold print looking ominous. I regret to inform you that we have just received an urgent report of a potential structural failing in the fire suppression system. For the absolute safety of all our guests, I am forced to issue an immediate stop work order. I held the paper high for all to see the official seal. By the laws of the state of Oregon, I am declaring this site an active investigative site. This event must end now. I ask you all to please evacuate in an orderly fashion. Chaos erupted. No more murmurs, but panicked voices. The string quartet stopped playing. The waiters stood frozen, unsure what to do. Guests began rising to their feet, looking from me to the Harringtons with a mixture of pity and contempt. I looked at Kelly one last time. She was crying, not the happy tears of a bride, but the broken sobs of complete and utter ruin. Her magnificent dress now seemed like a hollow costume. Her face was a mask of horror, regret, and the agonizing realization of the cost of her choices. For a second, the father in me ached, but I knew this was necessary. A weak foundation must be demolished before you can rebuild. I placed the microphone back on the dais. My work here was done. I turned and walked off the stage, straight through the panicked crowd. No one stood in my way. They parted for me like the sea. As I passed the Harringtons, I heard him hiss, "Callahan, you'll pay for this." I didn't look back. He was the one who was about to get the bill. As I walked through the stone archway toward the parking lot, I saw the summit's security team, directed by Miguel, already beginning to professionally guide the guests out. My plan was being executed perfectly. I got into my Ford F-250 and started the engine. The familiar roar was the sound of power and honesty in a world of artifice. I didn't look back at the summit again. I had built it, and today I had taught everyone a lesson about the most important thing of all, the foundation. The drive down the gravel service road was a slow descent, a return to the complicated earth. The air felt heavy with the scent of pine and a faint aroma of burnt pride. I wasn't in a hurry. The chaos I had set in motion would handle itself. The Harringtons would scramble to pay for what they had received for free and to explain to their guests why the wedding was canceled. For them, it was a financial blow and a social catastrophe. For me, it was a single, painful act, a necessary demolition. My phone was a dead weight in my pocket, but I wasn't ready to answer. I needed this silence to process what I had done. All I knew was that I had to do it. I reached the highway and merged into traffic, the world outside oblivious to the drama behind me. A wave of exhaustion washed over me, far heavier than any load I had ever carried on my truck. I leaned back in my seat and closed my eyes for a moment. The image of Kelly's horrified face flashed behind my eyelids, superimposed with the girl who had proudly showed me her lopsided birdhouse. I had told her it was beautiful, built with her own hands and pride. The woman she had become, however, had forgotten that lesson. She had chosen a life built on borrowed glamour and superficial status. She had tried to build a magnificent castle on a flimsy, dishonest foundation, and I had to show her what happens when you build on a lie. My hands on the steering wheel were a testament to a life lived with honesty and hard work. I wasn't ashamed of my hands, my work, or my life. My only regret was that the daughter I loved had been so ashamed of them that she was willing to erase me from the most important day of her life. The foundation of a building is what holds it all together. The foundation of a life is the same. I had to tear it all down so she could see what she was sacrificing. It was the hardest thing I had ever done, The perfect day was over. The real work, the work of rebuilding, was just beginning. I placed the microphone back on the dais. The dry thud echoed in the dead silence I had just created. My work here was done. I didn't throw them a triumphant look or a contemptuous smirk. There was only an emptiness, the exhaustion of a craftsman who has just completed a difficult demolition. I turned and walked off the stage, straight through the crowd that was beginning to dissolve into chaos. No one stood in my way. They parted for me like water before the bow of a ship, faces turned away, whispers rising behind me like a disturbed beehive. I could feel hundreds of eyes on my back, curious, shocked, a few pitiful, and many contemptuous. I didn't care. My armor was on, and it was forged from the steel of truth. As I passed the Harringtons, he blocked my path. His face was beet red, veins pulsing on his temples. "Callahan," he hissed, his voice cracking with rage, "you'll pay for this. You'll never work in this town again." I stopped, facing him directly for the first time. I looked into the bulging eyes of a man accustomed to a life of privilege, a man who'd never had to sweat for a single thing. "Pay, Harrington?" I said, my voice low and even, without a trace of fear. "You're the one about to get a $120,000 bill. And as for working in this town," I glanced up at the magnificent structure of the summit behind him, "I don't think you're in any position to decide that. I built half this city while you were still learning how to tie a tie." I didn't wait for a response. I sidestepped him and kept walking. I heard Mrs. Harrington begin to sob dramatically, and Spencer stammering Kelly's name. Those sounds belonged to another world, one to which I had just personally dismantled the bridge. As I walked through the stone archway toward the parking lot, I saw Miguel standing there, arms crossed over his chest. He said nothing, just gave me a single sharp nod. A nod of respect, of understanding between men who build things. It was worth more than all the hollow compliments from the party combined. I got into my Ford F-250 and slammed the door. The sound was a punctuation mark, sealing me off from the chaos outside. The cab's familiar scent of old leather and coffee enveloped me, a smell of authenticity. I sat there for a moment, hands gripping the wheel, looking at the summit through the windshield. A perfect structure, a rotten family foundation. Then the phone in my cup holder started to vibrate. The screen lit up with the name Kelly. The buzzing was jarring in the silence. I ignored it. It buzzed again, a second time, a third. Each vibration was like a small hammer blow against my ribs. She was panicking. She was looking for an answer, for salvation. She was looking for her father. But the father she was looking for was no longer there. The easy-going father, the forgiving father, the father who would do anything for his daughter's smile, had been left behind on that terrace. I wasn't going to answer tonight. There would be consequences, there would be tear-filled conversations, there would be brokenness. But to rebuild, first you have to tear down. I looked back at the summit one last time. Through the windows, I could see guests scurrying away, a few looking back with morbid curiosity. The dream party had become a nightmare, and I thought about the profound irony of it all. Everything they had, everything they desired on this day, was paid for by the labor of the one man they despised. Spencer's budding career was built on a connection he called lucky. Their home was perfected by workmen they called a good deal. And this fairy tale wedding was guaranteed by the money and honor of the father they deemed unsuitable. You can't buy dignity, I told myself, but you can certainly show people the price of ignoring it. The phone buzzed again, the fifth time. This time, an image flashed in my mind. Kelly, age 5, pigtails, proudly holding up a lopsided birdhouse she'd made from scrap wood. It was crooked, painted messily, but to my eyes then, it was a masterpiece. "See, Daddy," she had said, "I'm a builder, just like you." A pang went through my heart. Where did I lose that little girl? Or did I let her get lost in a world of superficial values, a world I worked so hard for her to enter, yet forgot to teach her how not to be consumed by it? This was the hardest lesson, not just for her, but for me, too. I turned the key. The V8 engine roared to life, a sound of power and honesty. I put the truck in drive and slowly pulled away. As the truck rolled forward, I thought of my own father's old saying, a wise old carpenter. "Son, you can build the strongest house in the world, but if it's built on sand, it's still going to fall." The Harringtons, Spencer and Kelly, they had tried to build a magnificent life on the sand of arrogance and disrespect. And today, this old builder had to bring in the bulldozer. I drove down the mountain, leaving my greatest creation behind me. The lights of the summit faded in my rearview mirror like a shattered dream. Ahead, the lights of Oakhaven, the city I helped build, welcomed me. That was the real world, my world. My phone vibrated one more time. This time I picked it up, but instead of answering, I powered it off. The silence returned. There would be a day for talking. There would be a day for healing, or maybe not. But today was the day for the lesson about foundations, the lesson that you should never be ashamed of the hands that built your life, and that sometimes the only way to teach someone your value is to show them exactly what life looks like without you. The drive down the winding mountain road was slow and deliberate. Each curve was a chance to reflect, to process the tectonic shift that had just occurred. The cool night air slipped through the cracks in the window, a cleansing breath after the stifling atmosphere of the summit. I thought about the Harringtons. I saw the fear in their eyes beneath the bluster and rage. They were facing something they couldn't buy, manipulate, or charm their way out of, a very public, very costly reckoning. Their world, built on a delicate foundation of appearances and unspoken lies, had just been exposed to the harsh light of day. It was a world where a handshake meant nothing without a contract, where gratitude was a transaction and loyalty was a commodity. My mind kept returning to the moment I saw Miguel. He and I weren't just colleagues, we were from a different tribe. We understood the language of blueprints, the weight of a girder, and the satisfaction of a job well done. Our worth wasn't measured by the brand of our suits or the size of our bank accounts, but by the integrity of our work. He saw what I had done, not as an act of petty revenge, but as a necessary act of demolition. Sometimes you have to tear down a faulty structure to save what's underneath, and that's a truth builders understand better than anyone. His nod was a testament to that shared understanding, a quiet recognition of a man who had chosen honor over convenience, even when it hurt. As the city lights grew larger in my windshield, a sense of quiet triumph began to replace the exhaustion. I had been carrying the weight of their disrespect for years, the snide comments, the condescending tones, the way they spoke about honest work as if it were a necessary but unfortunate inconvenience. I had endured it all for Kelly's sake, for the hope that she would see the real me, the man who built things, not just for money, but for a sense of purpose. But my silence had been a mistake. It had allowed their arrogance to fester, to grow into a monster that threatened to consume my daughter's happiness. I hadn't just stood up for myself tonight. I had stood up for the value of hard work, for the quiet dignity of a man who makes things with his own two hands. I thought of my own father again. He was a simple man, a carpenter who could make a piece of wood sing. He taught me that every nail had a purpose, every joint a reason. He taught me that a house isn't just a collection of materials, it's a testament to the people who built it. He would have been proud of me tonight, not for the chaos I caused, but for the truth I spoke. He always said the truth was the strongest foundation of all. It can't be bought, it can't be bribed, and it can't be knocked down with an empty threat. Harrington's rage was a child's tantrum against an immutable law of nature, the law of consequence. The phone, now silent in my cup holder, felt heavier than before. It represented the next phase, the cleanup, the difficult conversations, the tears. But I knew that tonight's silence was more powerful than any words I could have said. It forced her to sit with the reality of what had just happened. It forced her to confront the choices she had made and the company she had kept. I had given her a harsh lesson, a cold splash of reality. It was a risk, a gamble that she would see the man who loves her and not just the man who shattered her perfect day. But if there was any chance of rebuilding a true, honest relationship with my daughter, it had to start with the truth. And sometimes you have to break something to make it whole again. My truck rumbled past the old Oakhaven Bridge, a structure I had helped build early in my career. Its steel arches stood strong against the night sky, a monument to a lifetime of honest labor. The city lights beckoned, a mosaic of hope and possibility. This was my home, my legacy. I had left a perfect building behind me, a testament to my skill. But I was driving toward something more important, the chance to build something true with the people I loved, starting with a foundation of honesty. The work was far from over, but for the first time in a long time, I felt like the foundation was finally solid. Thank you for listening to the story until the end. If you've ever been through a similar situation or have any thoughts on this story, please share them in the comments so we can discuss them together. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next story.